The history of the world is written in stone and blood, but there are places on this earth where the silence screams louder than any cannon. We begin our journey in the year 1457. We are standing in the heart of the Balkan Peninsula, a land where geography itself seems designed for war. These are the mountains of Albania. They are not merely geological formations. They are the teeth of the earth, sharp, jagged gray limestone rising aggressively against the azure sky. It is early September. The heat of the summer has begun to fade, replaced by the damp, clinging mists of autumn. Here, in a valley known to the locals as Albulena, or White Water, the world feels suspended in time. The wind moves through the ancient pine forests with a low, mournful howl, rattling the dry needles. If you stand very still, you can smell the scent of resin, of wet earth, and the faint, metallic tang of ozone before a storm. But today, there is another scent on the wind. It is the smell of sweat, of oiled leather, of horsehair, and of iron. Below, in the basin of the valley, a force of nature is moving. It is not a storm of clouds, but a storm of men. The Ottoman army, 40,000 soldiers. Some historians argue it was 50,000, others whisper 80, but numbers cease to have meaning when they reach such a scale. It is a city on the move. It is a river of green banners and white turbans flowing relentlessly through the narrow arteries of the mountains. They march with the heavy, rhythmic thud of boots that has shaken the ground from Constantinople to the gates of Hungary. To the observer on the ridge, they look invincible, and indeed, they believe they are. They serve Mehmed II, the man who did the impossible, the man who breached the walls of Theodosius and brought the Roman Empire to its knees. They carry with them the certainty of victory, a psychological armor as thick as the steel plates on their chests. But they are being watched. High above them, merged with the granite and the shadows of the forest, 8,000 men lie prone. They do not move. They barely breathe. They have been waiting for days, their bodies aching, their lips cracked from thirst, their eyes burning from the strain of vigilance. These are the soldiers of Albania. They are shepherds, farmers, and nobles united by a single, desperate purpose. They are the ghosts of these mountains, and they are led by a man who has become a myth in his own lifetime. A man they call the Dragon of Albania, George Castrioti, Skanderbeg. What unfolds in this valley over the next 24 hours will not just be a battle. It will be a collision of worlds. It will be a moment where the destiny of Europe teeters on the edge of a sword. This is the story of the perfect ambush, the story of Albulena. To understand why 8,000 men would dare to challenge the might of a superpower, we must cast our gaze back. We must understand the world of the mid-15th century. It is a time of twilight for the old order. The medieval world is dying, and something new, something terrifying and magnificent, is being born in the East. The Ottoman Empire is not merely a kingdom, it is a machine. A military and bureaucratic engine refined over a century of conquest. It is a state dedicated to the expansion of the faith and the dominion of the House of Osman. Its armies are the most disciplined in the world. While European knights still ride into battle seeking individual glory, chaotic and disorganized, the Ottomans fight as a single organism. They have logistics, supply lines, artillery corps, and the Janissaries, the first modern standing army in Europe. In 1453, the unimaginable happened. Constantinople fell. The shockwave of this event cannot be overstated. For 1,000 years, that city had stood as the guardian of the West. When its walls crumbled under the fire of the great bombard cannons, a cold fear gripped every court from Naples to London. The question on the lips of every king and pope was simple: who is next? The answer was obvious. The road to Rome lay through the Balkans. If the Ottomans could secure the Adriatic coast, they could launch an invasion of Italy. They could strike at the heart of the Catholic Church. And the only thing standing in their way, the only speed bump on this road to conquest, was a small mountainous strip of land called Albania. For the Sultan, Mehmed the Conqueror, Albania was a frustration. It was a rugged, impoverished land that offered little in the way of gold or silk. But strategically, it was the key to the Adriatic. He looked at his maps in the Topkapi Palace, tracing the coastline with a jeweled finger, and he saw that as long as the Albanian resistance held, his dream of a universal empire remained incomplete. But the resistance had a face, and it was a face the Sultan knew well: Skanderbeg. The story of Skanderbeg is a tragedy of Shakespearean proportions. Born Gheorghe Castrioti, the son of a local nobleman, his life was stolen from him when he was just a boy. He was taken as a devshirme, a tribute of blood. The Ottomans took the sons of Christian subjects, converted them to Islam, and trained them to be the elite administrators and soldiers of the empire. Imagine the trauma of that child. Ripped from his mother's arms, taken from the cold mountains of his home, to the humid, bustling, alien world of the Ottoman court in Edirne. There, his name was stripped away. He was given the name Iskender, the Turkish version of Alexander. It was a name of power, a name of prophecy. He grew up in the shadow of the Sultan. He was educated in the finest schools. He learned Arabic, Persian, and Turkish. He studied Aristotle and the Quran. But most importantly, he studied war. He learned how to move an army of 10,000 men across a desert. He learned how to conduct a siege. He learned the strengths of the heavy cavalry and the weaknesses of the infantry square. He became a favorite of the court, a brilliant general who won battles for the glory of the Crescent. For 20 years, he served the empire that had enslaved him. He killed its enemies. He expanded its borders. To all appearances, the Albanian boy was dead, replaced by the perfect Ottoman commander. But memory is a stubborn thing. Deep in his heart, beneath the layers of indoctrination and the allure of power, the embers of his identity still glowed. He remembered the songs of his people. He remembered the taste of the mountain air. In 1443, during a chaotic battle near Nis against the Hungarians, Skanderbeg made his choice. It was a decision that would doom him to a life of endless war. He deserted. With a band of 300 loyal men, he rode hard for Albania. He tricked the governor of the fortress of Kruja into surrendering the keys, and that night he raised his banner, a black, double-headed eagle on a field of blood red. He stood on the battlements of Kruja and declared, "I have not brought you liberty. I found it here, among you." For 14 years, Skanderbeg held the line. He defeated army after army. He became known as the Athleta Christi, the champion of Christ. But time is a cruel enemy. By 1457, the Albanian resistance was cracking. The land was scorched by constant invasions. The people were starving. The treasury was empty. And then came the blow that nearly finished him. It did not come from the enemy. It came from his own family, Hamza Castrioti. He was Skanderbeg's nephew. He was the second most powerful man in the rebellion. Skanderbeg had raised him, trained him, and loved him like a son. Hamza was a warrior of immense talent. He was charismatic, brave, and brutal, but he was also consumed by a cancer of the soul, envy. Hamza looked at his uncle, who was aging, and he looked at himself, young and vigorous. He believed that he should be the heir. But when Skanderbeg fathered a son, Hamza realized he would never inherit the crown. He would always be the second man. The shadow, the Ottoman spies, masters of psychology, sensed this weakness. They reached out to Hamza in the dark. They offered him what his uncle could not. They offered him a kingdom. They promised him that if he defected, if he returned to the Sultan, he would be made the ruler of Albania. The scene of his defection is one of the most dramatic moments in history. Hamza, the hero of the resistance, rode out of the camp, and did not look back. He traveled to Constantinople. He walked into the throne room of Mehmed the Conqueror, knelt on the silk carpets, and kissed the hand of the man who wanted to destroy his people. This was not just a loss of a general. It was an intelligence catastrophe. Hamza knew everything. He knew Skanderbeg's tactics. He knew the secret passes through the mountains. He knew where the food was hidden. He knew the signal codes. He handed the Sultan the keys to Skanderbeg's destruction. Mehmed II did not hesitate. He ordered the assembly of the largest expeditionary force ever sent against Albania. He placed it under the command of Skanderbeg, a seasoned veteran, but the true guide was Hamza. The mission was clear. Do not just defeat Skanderbeg, erase him, hunt him down like a wolf, and bring his head to the capital. The summer of 1457 saw the mobilization of a war machine of terrifying proportions. In the military camps of Macedonia, the fires burned all night. The armorers sharpened thousands of scimitars. The Fletchers prepared hundreds of thousands of arrows. The logistics officers calculated the tons of grain needed to feed 40,000 men and thousands of horses. The army that marched north was a cross-section of the empire's might. There were the Akinci, the irregular light cavalry, wild and fast, the scouts who burned and pillaged ahead of the main force. There were the Azaps, the peasant infantry, expendable and numerous, used to wear down the enemy. There were the Sipahis, the feudal cavalry, men of land and wealth who rode in heavy chainmail, the iron fist of the Ottoman charge. And at the center, the Janissaries, the Sultan's personal guard, men taken as children just like Skanderbeg and forged into fanatical warriors who knew no fear and accepted no defeat. They marched in perfect silence, a psychological weapon in itself. As this Leviathan moved into Albania, a strange thing happened. They expected resistance. They expected ambushes in the narrow passes. They expected Skanderbeg to fight for every inch of ground. But they found nothing. The villages were empty. The granaries had been burned. The wells had been filled with stones. Skanderbeg had enacted a scorched earth policy, but more than that, he had vanished. He had disbanded his army. He sent his men into the deepest forests, into the caves, onto the highest peaks. He told them to hide their weapons and blend in with the rocks. He himself moved with a small bodyguard, staying constantly on the move, never sleeping in the same place twice. It was a gamble of immense risk. He was counting on the arrogance of his nephew. He wanted Hamza to believe that the rebellion was over, that fear had finally broken the lion of Albania. Rumors were planted by double agents. They whispered in the marketplaces that Skanderbeg had fled to Italy, that he was dying of a fever, that he had gone mad. Hamza and Skanderbeg listened to these rumors, and they wanted to believe them. They marched deep into the territory, finding no enemy to fight. The tension of the campaign began to dissolve. The soldiers, initially on edge, began to relax. They believed they were on a victory parade, not a war campaign. By late August, the Ottoman army reached the valley of Albulena. It was a perfect location for a massive camp. A wide, flat plain surrounded by hills, with a river running through it to water the horses. It seemed like a sanctuary. They set up their tents. It was a city of canvas. The Sultan's banners were planted in the earth. The smoke of thousands of cooking fires drifted up into the clear mountain air. The sounds of war were replaced by the sounds of daily life. The blacksmiths repairing horseshoes, the cooks chopping onions and dried meat, the soldiers washing their clothes in the river. Hamza Castrioti walked through this camp with a sense of vindication. He wore the finest Ottoman silks. He rode a magnificent black Arabian horse. He looked at the mountains where he used to hide, and he felt superior. He had chosen the winning side. He had outsmarted his uncle. The war was effectively over, and he was the victor. The discipline of the army began to rot. The sentries became careless. They would sit and play dice instead of watching the tree line. The patrols became shorter and less frequent. The officers spent their nights drinking wine and dreaming of the rewards awaiting them in Constantinople. They celebrated the festival of the Sunnet, enjoying the warm autumn days. They did not know that they were sitting in the center of an amphitheater, and the audience was armed. For Skanderbeg, this was the hardest part of the war. It was not the fighting, it was the waiting. He had regrouped his forces in the dense forests of Mount Tumanishta, which overlooked the valley. He had divided his 8,000 men into 3 groups, one under his own command, one under the command of Count Arianiti, and one under the command of Moisi Golemi, another man who had once betrayed Skanderbeg, been forgiven, and was now desperate to prove his loyalty. The conditions for the Albanian soldiers were brutal. They were forbidden to light fires, for a single plume of smoke would give away their position. They ate dry bread and hard cheese. They slept on the wet ground, wrapped in their rough wool cloaks. They had to remain perfectly silent. Imagine the discipline required. 8,000 men hiding within striking distance of a massive enemy force, and not a single sound gave them away. Skanderbeg moved among them like a father. He knew many of them by name. He touched their shoulders, whispered words of encouragement. He told them that the Ottomans were not demons. They were men. Men who were fat with confidence. Men who were sleeping while death watched them. He studied the camp below. He watched the patterns of the patrols. He noticed that every day at noon, the heat was at its peak, and the Ottoman camp went into a lull. The guards were sleepy. The horses were unsaddled. The commanders were resting in their cool tents. He chose the hour, September the 2nd, midday. The morning of September the 2nd dawned bright and clear. The mist burned off early, revealing a blue sky. In the Ottoman camp, the routine was the same as always. The morning prayers, the feeding of the horses, the slow, lazy passage of time. Hamza and Isak Beg sat in the main pavilion, perhaps discussing their return march. They were confident. They were safe. Up on the mountain, Skanderbeg stood on a rocky outcrop. He looked at the sun. It was at its zenith. He drew his sword. The steel flashed in the sunlight. This was the signal. The first sound was not a human cry. It was the sound of the earth breaking. The Albanians had spent the nights preparing the terrain. They had loosened massive boulders. They had cut through the trunks of great trees, leaving them held up by only a few inches of wood. Now they pushed. The avalanche began slowly, a grinding of stone on stone, and then it accelerated with a terrifying roar. Thousands of tons of rock and timber crashed down the slopes. It sounded like thunder, but continuous and deafening. The debris slammed into the perimeter of the Ottoman camp. Tents were crushed. Men were buried in their sleep. The neat lines of the camp were shattered in seconds. And then came the noise. Skanderbeg had ordered every trumpeter and drummer to play at once. The sound was amplified by the acoustics of the valley. It was a wall of noise designed to shatter the mind. And with the music came the war cry. 8,000 voices screaming as one. The Ottoman soldiers, stunned, deafened, and confused, scrambled for their weapons. But before they could form a line, the Albanians were upon them. The attack came from 3 sides. It was a classic pincer movement executed with the precision of a clock mechanism. Skanderbeg led the center charge. He rode his white stallion, a beast as famous as its master. He did not lead from the rear. He was the tip of the spear. The impact of his cavalry against the disorganized Ottoman infantry was devastating. The Albanian light cavalry, riding their nimble mountain horses, danced around the heavy Ottoman troopers. They struck and retreated, struck and retreated. They used the terrain, luring the heavier Ottoman horses into the mud near the river, into the pits that had been dug during the night. Inside the camp, chaos reigned. The Janissaries, the bravest of the brave, tried to rally. They formed small islands of resistance, standing back to back with their halberds and scimitars, but they had no leadership. The chain of command had been severed in the first minutes of the attack. Hamza Castrioti fought with the desperation of a man who knows he is doomed. He ran from his tent, shouting orders, trying to find his horse. He saw his carefully laid plans turning to ash. He saw the Albanians pouring into the camp like a flood of black water. He recognized the tactics. He saw the feigned retreats, the flank attacks, the sudden volleys of arrows. He realized he was watching his own lessons being used against him. The battle was not a contest of strategy anymore. It was a slaughter in a confined space. The Ottoman numerical advantage became a curse. They were packed so tightly that they could not swing their swords. They trampled each other in the panic. The rear guard pushed forward, trying to help, while the front line tried to retreat, creating a deadly crush in the center of the camp. In the midst of this inferno, Skanderbeg sought out his nephew. He cut a path through the elite guard. His sword arm rose and fell with mechanical rhythm. The chronicles say that Skanderbeg fought with a fury that was almost supernatural. He was a man possessed by the need to purge the betrayal from his land. He spotted Hamza's banner. The nephew and the uncle were separated by a swirling mass of combat, but their eyes met. In that moment, the history of their family, the love and the hate, hung in the air. Hamza tried to escape. He gathered a group of sipahis and tried to punch a hole through the Albanian line, aiming for the southern pass. It was a brave attempt. But Skanderbeg had anticipated this. He had placed a reserve force of spearmen at that exact location. Hamza's charge faltered. His horse was brought down by a javelin. The would-be king of Albania fell into the mud, his fine silk caftan stained with blood and dirt. He rose, drawing his saber, ready to die fighting. But the Albanian soldiers swarmed him. They did not kill him. They had strict orders. They tackled him, stripped him of his weapons, and bound him with rough hemp ropes. The traitor was taken. The battle raged all afternoon. The sun began to dip behind the mountains, casting long, distorted shadows across the valley of death. The Ottoman army, broken and leaderless, disintegrated. Thousands fled into the surrounding woods, only to be hunted down by the local militia who knew every tree and every cave. Isak Beg, realizing that the day was lost, managed to gather a small force of cavalry and fled towards the Macedonian border, abandoning his men, his camp, and his honor. As twilight settled over Albulena, the fighting slowed to sporadic skirmishes. The valley floor was a landscape of horror. The river ran red with blood, quite literally. The rich carpets, the gold plate, the jeweled daggers of the Ottoman officers lay scattered in the mud, trampled by hooves. The casualty numbers were staggering. It is estimated that between 15 and 30,000 Ottoman soldiers lay dead or dying. Thousands more were taken prisoner. It was the single greatest disaster for the Ottoman army in decades. Skanderbeg's losses were miraculously light. Night fell. A cold rain began to fall, washing the gore from the armor of the victors. The adrenaline faded, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. The Albanian soldiers sat on the ruins of the Ottoman camp, eating the food of their enemies, warming themselves by the fires of the invaders. Skanderbeg did not celebrate. He walked through the battlefield, his cape heavy with water. He looked at the faces of the dead janissaries, boys who had been taken just like him, who had died for a sultan they had been forced to love. He felt the tragedy of it all. He ordered Hamza to be brought before him. The meeting took place in the captured command tent. Hamza, bound and battered, looked at the floor. He expected execution, impalement perhaps, or beheading. That was the custom of the time. But Skanderbeg looked at him with a terrible sadness. "I taught you how to hold a sword," he reportedly said. "I taught you how to be a man, but I could not teach you loyalty." He spared Hamza's life. It was a punishment worse than death. Hamza was sent to prison in Naples to live out his days in a dark cell, rotting with his memories and his regrets, known forever as the man who betrayed his blood and lost. The news of the victory at Albulena exploded across Europe. When the messengers reached Rome, Venice, and Paris, the courts were stunned. The invincible Ottoman machine had been stopped. A ragtag army of mountaineers had destroyed the Sultan's finest. Pope Calixtus III ordered all the church bells in Christendom to ring at noon, a tradition that some say continues in the form of the midday bell today. He named Skanderbeg the Captain General of the Holy See. For Mehmed the Conqueror, Albulena was a bitter pill. He sat in his palace in Istanbul, staring at the Bosphorus, refusing to speak for days. He realized that as long as Skanderbeg breathed, the gate to Europe was barred. He would try again, year after year, but he would never defeat the Dragon of Albania in open battle. Skanderbeg gave Europe 25 years of breathing room. His resistance allowed the Italian states to prepare, allowed the Renaissance to flourish without the threat of immediate invasion. He was the shield upon which the Ottoman hammer broke time and time again. Today, the valley of Albulena is quiet again. The bones of the dead have long since turned to dust, feeding the roots of the pines. The iron swords have rusted into the earth. But if you walk there, if you listen to the wind in the trees, you can still feel the weight of that day. It is a place where history pivots. It reminds us that the fate of nations is not always decided by the biggest battalions. Sometimes it is decided by the courage of a few who refuse to kneel. It reminds us of the power of knowing one's own land, of the strength that comes from fighting for one's home. The Battle of Albulena was more than a military victory. It was a testament to the human spirit. It was the day the mountains roared. It was the day the shadow was pushed back. And the legend of that day, the legend of Skanderbeg and his ghosts, will echo as long as these mountains stand. This is the story of Albulena, a story of 40 minutes that changed 400 years of history.